Well, 7 days ago, Jerome Powell came up and made a statement that he's being threatened by Trump administration one way or the other, that if he doesn't comply with their terms, well, he could find himself charged with a kind of treason or kind of cases that could lead him to prison one way or the other. We should try to understand that there's such a threat in one way or the other to a Federal Reserve chairman, because we all understand that the Federal Reserve is an independent institute. It doesn't align with either Republicans or Democrats or your independent. It doesn't align in any kind of politics, one or the other. It's something we should try to understand that it's just an institute that's over trade control, one or the other, inflation or deflation in the economy, to maximize stability of the U.S. economy. However, with the Trump administration, we have seen threats, and these are real ugly threats, one or the other. Ever since, Jerome Powell had to rebuild the Federal Reserve Institute, he had to break it down and maximize the bill with over $500 million, and Trump made it to be something like a big deal, and which was in actual sense. However, with the Trump policies, Trump wanted to see what we should call like interest rates to be going lower and lower. Actually, I feel like he needs a zero interest rates in one or the other. He's looking for, but in terms of economics, we should try to understand that will be inflationary for the economy, and that will make the job for the U.S. For the Federal Reserve to be kind of incompetent in one or the other. Because imagine if you as a U.S. Treasury holder understand that the Treasury today or the economy today is being influenced by the administration policies. Imagine if those policies change. If we change from Democrats to Republicans, how will the stock market perform? How will the bond market perform one or the other? Because if such things are being implemented by the parties in power, let's say the Federal Reserve is being controlled by the party in power, that means if we have Democrats or independents, we'll always be having uncertainty in the U.S. economy. It means one or two things, that the Trump administration is a bit going further, actually. And we expect to see Federal Reserve losing independence, because we are expecting for Trump to be replacing Jerome Powell with Kevin Hassett, one or the other, because I see in one or the other that someone who's likely to be replacing Jerome Powell, and he's a Republican, one or the other. That means he's likely to give the real factors that Trump really loves, one or the other. So he's likely to be doing things in favor of Trump. We should try to understand that very soon you're likely to see the Federal Reserve losing its independence. Jerome Powell coming up and speaking up, other central banks like the big bank of the central bank, one or the other, came up and said that they are backing Jerome Powell. And the Trump administration is a bit going too far, one or the other, is being so naughty, one or the other, is becoming something that we should say like it's running out of hand. Because you should try to understand that Trump asking for interest rates to be lowered at this lowest, it means one or two things. Inflation is going to be rising high. Unemployment is likely to skyrocket, because whenever inflation is high, trust me, we should try to understand that why are we having the high inflation, and why is Trump asking for the lowering of interest rates to lower borrowing costs for the U.S. government? But the more the U.S. government borrows more, it won't borrow out of debt. Like, it won't be borrowed its money to pay off its debt in one or the other. In actual sense, actually, it will either double or triple one or the other. Lowering interest rates more and more without subconscious in form of economic factors means one or two things. It means that act of one or the other of breaking the U.S. stock market in one or the other. If we just go blindly according to the U.S. administration or the Trump ideologies, you're risking the U.S. economy, actually. See, to understand what's taking place, a threat on the chairman of Federal Reserve relies on one more other thing that we should be called like the Moody Institute. These are institutes that rate the U.S. treasuries. If they're having such wars and political differences one or the other, or the political defiance that's getting itself into the Federal Reserve, it shows one or two things. Moody is likely to come back to rate down the U.S. Treasury bonds from the double A, because it was once a triple A, today it's a double A, to a single A. That means there will be no longer safe havens. The political differences that have been taking place between the Trump administration and the Democrats and Republicans, one or the other, that alone has made the U.S. Treasury to be rated down one or the other. They have been kept shrinking one or the other. they have been seen losing it one or the other. This means one or two things: that if the Trump administration keeps with such policies and also trying its level best to keep the influencing itself into the Federal Reserve duties, you're risking the U.S. Treasuries, you're risking the U.S. economy, you're risking trust in the U.S. Treasuries, you're risking actually a lot of economic factors due to Trump wanting everything to be in his own favor. This means one or two things: that where we are heading to, we are seeing Trump is not ready to revise the U.S. debt. However, he's asking for more money to borrow, like more borrowing costs and one or the other. He's asking for what we should try to understand that as he's asking for. However, these short time gains are impacted in the near future, passed by the Congress and one or the other. The Trump big and beautiful bill that made Trump to be having a difference between Elon Musk and him made one or two things. It's going to be inflation for the US at least for the next 4 to 5 years or 10 years. It's like to add 4.5 trillion on the US debt. That's overspending. The US government needs to revise its spending other than looking at the face. The US government needs to revise its allocation of funds. Today, the US is implementing tariffs which will be saying they are good, but in actual sense they aren't impacted as they should be. In actual sense, the US government needs to revise its own spending, which is the opposite. They're raising debt that's raising almost every after 90 days. We are raising with a trillion. Just servicing the US debt is just around, we should be speaking around $1 trillion US. That's in servicing that debt. That's the interest servicing debt. For context, we should try to understand that Trump is keeping his eyes in the wrong place. Looking at the Federal Reserve doing things the way he feels like is a wrong ideology. Because we all know why the US is in such a kind of debt. It's because of the overspending, the lack of looking at productivity at home, the lack of revising how the US government spends. Because today they just doubled the armory to almost 1.5. They're getting ready for war. Looking at the factors that are causing de-dollarization all over the global economy, they're looking at them as threats. They're looking at the BRICS as threat. Other than revising why the US dollar is losing it, nobody's ready to look at that. I promise you, not Republicans, not Democrats, are ready to look at the US debt. The government, anyone in power, is just there to spend actually. Politicians like to spend one or the other, like it or not. In terms of economics, looking at the Federal Reserve as something that should change the US economy is pretty wrong. It's not something that we should be looking at as something that has a factor of change. It's not a factor that we should be looking at as a factor that's going to be changing the US economy one or the other. If you look at the dollar, look at the DXY. For the last 6 months, it's under 100. Today, Canada just had a deal with China, doing the favor of the tariff from 100% to 6.5 on the Chinese EVs. What does that mean for the car industry in the US? Those are all factors that are showing that reliance on the US, because Trump is pushing his policy over America first goods, which is understandable, well and good. But the way you're impacting such policies, the policies are way overwhelming that they are not likely to be impacted in the right now time. They are likely to be impacted in the next 5, 6, 7 years for that to happen. And the reliance on the Canadian goods or Chinese goods is way high than home productivity. We should try to understand that home productivity in the US is a bit expensive because due to the inflation, due to the higher costs. If the US government doesn't revise its overspending, if the US government doesn't revise how it allocates its funds in the US economy, productivity is low. Let's understand that. The GDP number that you see the US economy is showing you, there's additional stimulus. In terms of stimulus, I mean that stimulus was added because we should try to define what's GDP. GDP is the number of goods and services at a given moment. That means also the money that being injected into the economy through the US is also added in the GDP. And whoever's taking GDP figures has growth, you're seeing it in a wrong way. It's not something that we should be saying it's right. It's actually the opposite. Whenever you see GDP numbers doing well, look at the productivity numbers. Look at the ratio numbers that are looking at everything. Look at the stock market. Today, the stock market, we should say, okay, it's the global stock market, one or the other. The stock market is all-time high. Everything is all-time high. But looking at the Federal Reserve as something that's asking it to lower interest rates and making borrowing costs to be less, it's going to be crazy inflation. And inflation without control will lead to hyperinflation. All these are big numbers. All these are factors that we should be looking at first. Otherwise, if Trump doesn't revise that, and is keeping his eyes into the Federal Reserve, we are going to see U.S. Treasury being in line of being, let's say, it's just like Moody revising it down to from a double A, which was a triple A before, to a single A. That would mean they will be just simply safe, but not safe havens. That means borrowing costs for the U.S. government is going to be getting higher. In simple terms, there's no way to run out of this, or it's a trend that's not likely to stop one or the other. It's a trend that's not likely to be chopped off unless they start. This is, I'm going to give you this. This is just an example of a ship, a ship on the sea, just moving around, but very soon it's likely to be seeing a port going down, unless they start ditching some of the commodities that they are oversitting on, that are likely to be stopping them from making a turn. If Trump doesn't revise the policies of the U.S. government, how it spends, because I thought that was the job of the Doge, to cut down spending. However, Trump is doing the opposite. Otherwise, we hope to see better changes, but time will tell. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.